Okay, let's get to the related work next. So in some fields, the related work goes at the end of the paper, but usually in HCI, it goes at the beginning. It's sometimes called a background section as well. So if you notice on these papers, the related work usually takes up page 3. So if my abstract intro are 1 and 2, related work is usually page 3. So here's Mallard, so it's page 3. Bespoke is page 3. Same thing, DSJS Porta. It's usually about a page or so, maybe a little less than a page. Study papers as well. So related work comes, yeah, it's about, it's, 3/4 of page to page. It comes out right after the intro. And the reason for putting the related work and background after the intro is that you want to set the scene for motivating why you are doing your work and how it is differentiated from prior work. So I'm not going to go over the obvious things of what related work should be about, but I want to talk about a few points. This one says background and related work as well. So here's DSJS background and related work. One good thing to do is break it up into subsections. Usually you should probably have, around 3 subsections here, and they're kind of marked off nicely. Again, this is 3 subsections of related work. There are 4 subsections here, I guess. So you want to group them together, and then basically what you want to do in each subsection is to summarize a set of related work that's a related set of related work. And then at the very end of each subsection, you want to kind of talk about how your system differs or how your system builds on it or extends the state of the related work. And it's again an art to pick what to put in your related work section because you obviously can't put everything, and it's something that just takes a lot of practice to do, I think. But I think it's really important because this is what's going to establish the context for your novel contribution. So the idea behind related work is roughly what happens. I'm just going to scribble all over this. Is that you want to say that here's a big space that you're all playing in your field, and then people have done some work here, there's some work here in this clump, and there's some work here in this clump, and there's some work here, but oh, lo and behold, there's this gap right here. For some reason, you've carved out this gap that there's nobody really doing something in this gap, and lo and behold, the next section, which is your system or your study, is going to fill in this gap, and you're going to contribute to this body of work. So that's the ideal related work section. And that, one misnomer about related work is that you need to somehow say why your work is quote unquote better than something else. You don't need to say why it's better. You just need to say why it's different, right? Why it is not exactly occupying the same space as these clusters of work that came before you. So the idea behind related work is that you want to paint a really nice picture of what is surrounding you and just leave a gap here, an obvious gap that you can fill. And in fact, it's a big mess here. It's actually good to be complementary, like in terms of complementing the related work, because you want to say nice things about the related work because those people are probably going to be your reviewers, right? Because, if the reviewer assignments are done well, the reviewers are probably going to be the authors of some of these related work things. So a bad related work section is just, insulting a bunch of related work and saying, wow, bad, we're better, right? So don't do that because you're just going to insult your reviewers. Rather, a much more diplomatic thing is to say, here's what these have done, and here's how they're different. And here's, they might have some shortcomings that we might want to fill, but you don't want to say, these existing systems are really, subpar or whatever. So yeah, so don't insult related work. Another thing, for study papers like this, for like the older adults study, another purpose of related work is to set context and motivation for your study. So, this one is the first known study of older adults learning programming. So like, the novelty pitch here is that people haven't studied this particular population of older adults learning programming yet. So isn't any related work on older adults studying programming. So then why do I have a related work section that's like, that's a whole page? It's because I want to see stuff that's around, right? So this is age-targeted research and learning programming. This is basically saying there's a bunch of people studying learning programming about kids and people of different ages, but, no one has done for older adults. So right here, all the aforementioned work share a human-centered tradition of first trying to discover motivations, values, and needs of each age group before designing tools and interventions for them. Our work in this paper extends this long disciplinary tradition to a population to our knowledge has not been studied in prior work, older adults age 60 or over. So this is kind of like, yes, there was a bunch of work on studying people in different ages in programming, but hey, look, there's a gap, right? There's a gap that no one's looking at older adults. So again, this is the, I'm going to scribble over here. There's the people have studied this stuff for all different ages, but hey, look, there is a gap right here for older adults. And hey, lo and behold, we're going to fill in this gap. And then there's a complementary set of related work here. So this is saying how there's a bunch of people who studied learning programming, but they haven't studied older adult in programming. And then the other set of complementary related work here is older adult use of technology. So there's a bunch of people that have studied older adults using technology, using all sorts of different technologies, but they haven't studied older adults with programming as a technology. So there's another paragraph right here. So recall the previous paragraph. I'm going to jump around a bit. This previous paragraph says, people have studied all ages in programming, but our work is a first to extend to older adults in programming. And then the ending paragraph down here, I'm just going to read this out loud, is our work follows a progression in this literature from studying older adults first as consumers of technology, then as producers of digital content, and now to potentially becoming producer of new technology via computer programming. So this idea is that people have studied older adults and technology in a lot of ways, but they haven't studied it in terms of potentially creating new technologies via programming. Again, establishing this, hey, look, older adult, older adult, older adult, older adult, older adult, older adult. Hey, there's a gap here. No one has done older adults in programming. We're going to fill this gap. So, a nice related work section creates these gaps and then sets to fill it in. Of course, it's up to you to determine the gaps, but you want to show that you've done an honest job. The other thing about related work is that you really need to know your literature well, because if there are obvious sections of related work that are missing, it's going to count against you. I mean, if you're just missing one paper that's kind of tangential, it's fine. But for example, for this thing, we submitted to CHI, which is a major HCI conference. If I didn't have this section about older adults' use of technology right here, it would be a total red flag, because there is a lot of papers at CHI and other HCI conferences about older adults using technology. So if I didn't include this, it would just show that I haven't done my homework at all and haven't contextualized my study. So that is pretty much all I have to say about the related work section.